Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we're going to be talking about 5 more stand-up performances from Spring Football League players in the NFL preseason, this time in Week 2 of the 2025 preseason. Now, we're not just talking about UFL guys just like last week. There obviously been Spring Football League players from the USFL, AAF, XFL, and we are adding an XFL guy to this one because there was one that had a really good performance this past weekend. And we're also going to have a couple cameos from some other guys, so we're really going to be looking at a total of like 8 players, though mainly 5. Without further ado, let's get started with Chris Blair of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, when you think of the 2023 defenders, I know a lot of people think of Lucky Jackson. He was a great receiver, but there was another one on that team in Chris Blair. And Blair had a great outing for the Falcons this past weekend. He ended up leading the entire game in receiving yards at 78 on just 3 receptions. He also had a touchdown at the end of the third quarter, which would end up making the tie game against the Titans. Now, the Falcons would end up losing in the fourth quarter as they would allow a field goal and not score any points. But Blair's touchdown is what tied the game up, obviously with the extra point, to give the Falcons a chance at winning this game. Now, he's been with the Falcons since 2023, so he's been there now 3 years. Now, he hasn't been a consistent active roster guy, but he has been a part of the team roster practice squad, obviously, for now 3 years. And this is proving that, again, spring football does work. As we mentioned before, just being a practice squad guy gets you so much more money than even just playing in the UFL. So being somebody like him who was obviously never an active roster guy with the Packers to go into the Defenders to then get another shot with the Falcons is a pretty big deal for him. And so congrats to Blair for having an outstanding performance. Again, most receiving yards in the entire game, not just of the Falcons, entire game. Great performance by him. Now, the second one we're going to be talking about is going to be Damon Arnette. Now, Arnette, obviously, big old storyline. First round pick from the Raiders a few years ago. Had a lot of issues that ended up having him get, released. And he really hadn't been in football for a while, right? 2021 was the last time being on an active roster. And then, of course, he went to the Houston Roughnecks. And with the Roughnecks, he had a great season and parlayed that to another shot with the Houston Texans. Yes, Houston to Houston. Now, in this game, there was a bit of a caveat in it. But we still have to talk about it because, again, this is one of the more high-profile guys to go to the UFL and then obviously go back to the NFL. Now, Arnette did get an interception in this game. It was early in the fourth quarter, but in the run back, he did end up fumbling it. Now, Houston did get the ball and would score. This would be their only touchdown in the fourth quarter was after his interception, which, again, as you can see, was an interception right beyond their own 15. So obviously, there was a free touchdown. But during the run back, he did fumble, and he didn't have any other true stat. So exactly how much of an impact this is going to have, we'll see. For someone like Arnette, though, the main goal is not to just be an active roster guy. It's just to stick around. Because, again, for someone like him, he was out of football, essentially, until he went to the Roughnecks in 2025. And this is the kind of story you really do want to see. If he becomes an active roster guy, it's going to be huge for the league. Because this is the exact type of player that would be like, okay, wow. If you're, let's just say, another first-round pick, you're thinking, I don't want to go to the UFL. I don't want to go to a lower league. I only want to play in the NFL. But then you're out of the league, and then you see that a guy like Damon Arnette ends up going to the UFL, and it parlays him to get an NFL shot. You realize, hey, you know what? I should go there. And so when you're seeing that, you get bigger names for the UFL, which is beneficial for the league, and it gets more guys opportunities to go back to the NFL, which then obviously benefits the league itself again. So this is a move that hopefully ends up panning out for the Houston Texans, hopefully ends up making the roster at some, shape or form. But overall, though, still, great to see an interception from a former spring football player, especially one this past season. So there's Arnette. Now, the third one we have is Jacob Sailors. Now, this is one where we do have to talk about a couple of the guys. Nick Whiteside and DJ Miller, a former Battlehawk and former Panther this past season, both had 3 tackles in this game, including 2 of them being solo tackles each. So, pretty big deal there, especially from DJ Miller. Obviously, Detroit, to Detroit, Michigan to Detroit, if you want to be technical about it. But Ford Field to Ford Field, had a great season last year, and, of course, him being with the Lions is cool. Again, Dan Campbell's been really outspoken about the league being a good thing, talking about these guys having live reps unlike a lot of other people, which is what you really want to hear, and there's a lot of proof, because again, we didn't even mention Jake Bates on this roster or other guys. But as for Sailors, second week in a row where he has been the leading rusher for the Lions. Now, a lot of this is because of how much he played. He did play essentially like most of the game, the second quarter to the end of the game. But he did have 13 carries for 39 yards. Now, it's not the greatest stat line in the world. 3 yards a carry is not what you want to see. But he did also do kick returns, and he did have a 30-yard average on those kick returns, which is a pretty good number to see. So if he's able to become a versatile player, he could end up making the roster as a backup return man who can also come in as, that third, fourth string running back. So if you're seeing that, especially considering that he did have a reception for like 5 yards, and he's been a great receiving back, throughout his career, you have a multifaceted guy who can be really good to your team. And again, it's like Cavante Turpin, just, more so running back, less so as an overall great return man. But you know what I mean? You can have somebody that is able to do a lot of things, and to where if it ends up being, okay, well, we have, let's say, 2 roster spots left. Do we put 2 guys in here just because we need another running back and need a returner, or do you put a Jacob Sailors and then add an extra defender? You know what I mean? It's a pretty big thing to have, so congrats to Jacob Sailors for having another great game in the Lions. Number 4 is Kenny H. Lovely. Now, Kenny H. Lovely was another one like Damon Arnett who gets this, on this video because he had an interception. Now, his interception was definitely a nice one, had a really good read on a Spencer Rattler pass, as you can see just from the picture below. It was just, he jumped the route. It was a great interception. And he did also end up having a tackle in this game that was a solo tackle. Now, as Larson pointed out, he hardly played snaps up until this drive and then immediately gets an interception. Now, yes, in the middle of the fourth quarter, or the end of the fourth quarter, in the Week 2 preseason game isn't exactly the greatest spot to be, but this can parlay you to then getting a better shot as like a higher string in the final preseason game, as obviously we only have 1 preseason week left. So this could help Lovely end up getting that better spot in the preseason next week to then potentially make that active roster or practice squad. Again, another guy from the Panthers, just like DJ Miller, who had a pretty great season last year and who was able to get a nice interception. Especially with stats like these are the big stats you see. There were a lot of offensive linemen that had their good PFF days, but in terms of the average fan, they're not going to see that. Getting interceptions, that's something that gets eyes on a player and eyes on the UFL, obviously. So seeing that we got 2 of them, that was what you love to see, so congrats to Kenny H. Lovely on the interception. And last but not least is going to be Garrett Nelson. Now, we're also going to be talking about Dondre Tillman, of course, the guy that was really good for the Broncos last year from the Stallions. He ended up having 2 tackles in this game. A couple tackles, a couple assists, obviously. But Garrett Nelson, well, he didn't have solo tackles. He didn't have half a sack. But the main reason I'm talking about him is the fact that a course of 2 weeks, he's had a really good PFF grade. I know PFF is one that I'm not the biggest fan of because sometimes people will believe that that's, end-all, be-all. But when you have an 85.3 defensive grade via PFF across 2 games, it's pretty good. When you see a stat like that, that's showing that, hey, you are making the most of your snaps, and when you are playing, you are helping the team out immensely. So the fact is that Garrett Nelson could easily get a shot, especially because you have another guy who was a former Spring Football League pass rusher in Tillman, who ended up being a huge boost to the Broncos defense last year. So now you have another guy who's having a really good preseason on those overall analytical side of things. It's a good chance you end up getting him an opportunity to play and see what happens in the future. But overall, that'll do it. This has been ZomFox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when I upload any videos. Be on the lookout for later this week. Got a really cool video coming out later this week that I think you all are going to enjoy. Of course, there was the big news that I joined AFN that came out yesterday, 2 days ago. Depends on if I post this video on Monday or Tuesday, but came out on Sunday. Think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month to get an exclusive monthly video, team emojis, other benefits. And as always, guys, have a great night.